The great hall stretched beyond what human eyes could measure. Alina Vasquez stood at its center, feeling smaller than she had ever felt in her life. She was the first human ambassador to stand before the conclave of elders, and the weight of 8 billion souls rested on her shoulders. The year was 2347, and humanity had finally received the invitation they had waited centuries for. After proving themselves capable of faster-than-light travel, after establishing colonies on 12 worlds, after curing diseases and ending wars, they had been deemed worthy of notice. The great civilizations of the universe had finally looked at Earth and said, "You may enter." Alina had expected wonder. She had expected challenge. She had not expected to be laughed at. The beings around her were unlike anything she had imagined. The Zethkai floated as clouds of golden energy, their thoughts rippling through the air like heat from a flame. The crystalline minds stood as perfect geometric shapes, light bending through their bodies in ways that hurt to observe. The Voidwalkers existed as tears in space itself, as darkness given form and purpose, and all of them, every single one, regarded her with the same expression. It was not hatred. It was not fear. It was the gentle, patient amusement of adults watching a toddler try to join their conversation. "We welcome humanity to observer status," announced the eldest. A being that existed as pure mathematics, its form constantly shifting through equations and formulas. "You will watch. You will learn. In time, perhaps in another 1,000,000 years, you may contribute." Alina felt her jaw tighten. Observer status. We've crossed the galaxy to be observers. A ripple of laughter moved through the assembly. The sound was strange, coming from beings without mouths, without lungs, without any familiar anatomy. But laughter was universal, it seemed. So was condescension. A Zethkai elder drifted forward, its energy field projecting images into the air. A timeline appeared, stretching across the hall. At one end, a small blue dot marked humanity's existence. At the other end, stretching back impossibly far, the histories of the elder races unfolded. "You have existed for 300,000 years, the Zethkai said, its voice like wind through chimes. "We remember when your son was young. We watched your galaxy form. We have libraries older than your species, Ambassador. What could you possibly offer us?" Alina opened her mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the chamber. "Let the child speak, Zethkai. It costs us nothing to listen." The voice belonged to a Voidwalker, darkness pooling at its edges like smoke. Alina nodded her thanks, though she wasn't sure if the gesture meant anything to these beings. "We offer perspective," Alina said, choosing her words carefully. "We are young, yes, but youth is not weakness. We see things differently. We question things you take for granted. An alarm shattered the air. The sound was unlike anything Alina had heard before. It wasn't loud in the traditional sense. It was more like reality itself was screaming, like the fabric of existence was crying out in pain. Every being in the chamber stopped. The laughter died. The condescension vanished. For the first time, Alina saw fear in eyes that had witnessed the birth of stars. "The resonance vaults," whispered the eldest, its mathematical form flickering with distress. "They are failing." Alina watched as the elder beings rushed to action, their ancient movements suddenly urgent and desperate. She grabbed the arm of a passing crystalline mind, though her hand passed through its surface like water through glass. She demanded. "What's happening?" The crystalline mind paused, its facets spinning to face her. The vaults contained the first words, "Young One." The sounds that shaped reality when existence was new. They have stood for 12 billion years, maintained by a language that no living species can speak anymore. If they fail, the words will fade. And if the words fade, ... what happens? Physics unravels. Stars forget how to burn. Gravity forgets how to pull. Time forgets how to flow. Everything ends. Not in fire or ice, but in forgetting. Alina felt cold despite the warmth of the chamber. "How long do we have?" 2 galactic cycles. Perhaps 3, if we are fortunate. We have been trying to repair them for millennia, but the language of the speakers is lost. We know the sounds exist. We cannot produce them. No species can. The eldest's voice boomed across the chamber, silencing all other conversation. The conclave will convene an emergency session. All species will contribute their knowledge, their resources, their hope. We must find a way to speak the words again, or we will all fall into silence. Lena stood alone as the great beings of the universe hurried past her. Their attention finally pulled away from the amusing little human. She watched screens materialize in the air, displaying frequencies and waveforms. The dying sounds of the first words visualized for all to see, and then she stopped. Breathing. The patterns on the screen were familiar. Not just familiar, they were intimate. She knew these shapes, these rises and falls. They lived in the songs her grandmother had sung to her as a child. They echoed in the prayers of 100 human religions. They pulsed in the rhythm of human hearts, in the cadence of human speech, in the music that humanity had created across thousands of years and countless cultures. She knew these sounds because she had been hearing them her entire life. Elena pulled out her communication device and began recording the frequencies. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. This was impossible. This made no sense. Humanity was young. Humanity was insignificant. Humanity was a footnote in the great story of the universe. But these sounds, these dying, ancient reality-shaping sounds felt like home. Ambassador Vasquez, the eldest said, noticing her standing frozen in the chamber, "You should return to your vessel. This matter does not concern your species. We will inform you of any developments relevant to your observer status." Elena looked up at the mathematical being, and for the first time since arriving, she smiled. "I think," she said slowly, "this matter concerns my species more than anyone knows. I need to return to Earth immediately." The eldest's equations rippled with confusion. Why? What could Earth possibly offer? Elena held up her device, still recording the dying sounds of creation. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "But I think humanity has been keeping a secret. A secret we didn't even know we had." She turned and walked out of the Great Hall, leaving the ancient beings of the universe to their crisis. Behind her, the alarm continued to wail. The first words continued to fade. But Elena Vasquez was no longer afraid. She was beginning to remember something very, very old. Elena's ship cut through the darkness of space like a needle through silk. She had broken 17 traffic regulations leaving the conclave station, ignored for requests to slow down, and disabled her communication system when the Zethkai demanded she return for questioning. None of that mattered now. Only Earth mattered. Only the recording in her hand mattered. Dr. Marcus Chen was waiting for her when she landed. He was the best xenolinguist humanity had ever produced. A man who had learned 47 alien languages in his career and had written the standard textbook on universal communication patterns. He was also Elena's oldest friend, and the only person she trusted with what she had found. "Play it," Elena said. Handing him the device before she had even fully stepped off the ship, Marcus looked at her with concern. "Elena, you look like you haven't slept in days. What happened out there? The news feeds are saying the elder races are in some kind of crisis, but nobody knows. Play it." He sighed and pressed the activation button. The sound that emerged was strange and beautiful, like a symphony playing underwater, like thunder speaking in melody. It rose and fell in patterns that seemed to exist on the edge of understanding, almost meaningful. Almost words. And then something happened that neither of them expected from the back of Marcus's laboratory. A thin voice began to hum along. They both turned. Sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening, was Marcus's grandmother. Liu Wei was 97 years old. Her mind had been fading for years, stolen piece by piece by a disease that human medicine still could not cure. Most days, she did not recognize her own grandson. Most days, she sat in silence, lost in a fog of forgotten memories. But now she was humming. Her voice, cracked with age, was following the alien frequencies with perfect precision. And then she began to sing words. The words were not Chinese. They were not English. They were not any language that existed on Earth or anywhere else in the known universe. They were sounds that should have been impossible for a human throat to produce. Consonants that required organs humanity did not have. Vowels that bent space around them, and yet she sang them as easily as a lullaby. Alina and Marcus stood frozen as the old woman's song filled the laboratory. The equipment around them began to react. Screens flickered. Lights pulsed. A glass of water on the desk began to vibrate in sympathy with the sounds. When the recording ended, Lue fell silent. Her eyes, which had been bright and clear for those few moments, clouded over again. She looked at Marcus without recognition and asked if he knew when her grandson would visit. Marcus was crying. Alina realized she was crying too. How is this possible? Marcus whispered. She hasn't spoken a complete sentence in 2 years. She doesn't even know my name most days. But she knew. She knew those sounds perfectly. Elena's mind was racing. Get everyone. Every linguist, every historian, every anthropologist you know. We need to analyze every human language ever recorded. Every song, every prayer, every ancient chant. There's something hidden in our words, Marcus. Something we never knew was there. The next 3 weeks were the most intense of their lives. Scientists from every nation joined the effort. They analyzed the click consonants of the Khoisan languages of Africa, sounds that existed nowhere else on Earth. They studied the tonal patterns of Mandarin, where a single syllable could have dozens of meanings based on pitch alone. They examined the deep guttural sounds of Arabic, the complex rhythms of Finnish, the melodic structures of Vietnamese. What they found changed everything. Every human language, without exception, contained fragments of the dying frequencies. Not complete words, but pieces. Sounds that served no practical purpose in communication, but had been preserved across thousands of generations. Linguists had always wondered why certain sounds existed in human speech when they were so difficult to produce and so rarely used. Now they had an answer. Humanity had not invented language. Humanity had inherited it. The breakthrough came when they discovered the archive. 50 years ago, deep-sea expedition had found a structure beneath the Mariana Trench. It was clearly artificial, made of materials that did not exist anywhere on Earth, but every attempt to activate it had failed. Every attempt to communicate with it had met silence. Eventually, it had been classified as a dead artifact and largely forgotten. When Marcus spoke the first, reconstructed word near the archive's entrance, the structure woke up. Light flooded through corridors that had been dark for eons. Systems that had waited in patient silence began to hum with power. And a voice spoke, neither male nor female, neither young nor old, speaking directly into their minds. "You have returned," it said. "After so long, the children have finally remembered how to speak." The archive told them the truth. Earth was not humanity's birthplace. It was their hiding place. Billions of years ago. Before the elder races of the conclave had even begun to exist, there were the speakers. They were the first beings in the universe, born from the chaos of creation itself. They learned to speak, and in speaking, they shaped reality. Their words became the laws of physics. Their songs became the structure of space and time. They literally talked the universe into existence. But creation required sacrifice. To make their words permanent, to weave them into the fabric of reality forever. The speakers had to give themselves to their creation. One by one, they spoke their final words and dissolved into the cosmos, becoming the very laws they had created. Before the last of them faded, they created a failsafe. They took their essence, their memories, their potential, and seeded it into a new species. A species designed to sleep through the ages, to evolve naturally, to forget what they were until the time came when they would be needed again. That species was humanity. "You are not young," the archive said. "You are older than stars. You have simply been dreaming, and now you are waking up." Lena felt the weight of this truth settling into her bones. Humanity was not a footnote in the cosmic story. Humanity was the first chapter. Dreaming of the day they would write the final one. But their moment of wonder was interrupted by an urgent message from the conclave station. The elder races had discovered what Alina had found, and they were not united in their response. Half of them saw humanity as the answer to their prayers. If the children of the speakers could relearn the words, they could repair the resonance vaults and save existence itself. The other half saw humanity as the greatest threat the universe had ever known, a species that could speak reality into new shapes, that could rewrite the laws of physics with their voice, that could unmake everything the elder races had built across billions of years. Such power could not be allowed to exist. A fleet had been dispatched to Earth, 100 warships crewed by the Zethkai and their allies. Armed with weapons that could crack planets like eggs, Alina had hours, maybe less, before they arrived. She looked at Marcus, at his grandmother still sitting by the window, at the archive waiting patiently for instructions. She looked at the reconstructed word displayed on her screen, the first complete fragment of the primordial tongue reassembled in 12 billion years. "We need to go back," she said. "We need to show them what we really are." Marcus shook his head. "They'll kill us." "They're afraid, Elena. Fear makes people do terrible things," Elena smiled. And in that smile was something ancient, something that had been sleeping and human. Heart since the first person looked up at the stars and felt a strange longing for home. "Let them come," she said. "It's time humanity remembered how to speak." Elena's ship screamed through the void, engines burning at dangerous levels. Behind her, Earth grew smaller. Ahead, the unknown waited. She had left before the conclave fleet arrived, carrying with her the most precious cargo in the universe, the first reconstructed words, and a small team of humans who had no idea they were about to become the most important people in existence. She was not alone for long. The ships appeared without warning, sliding out of folded space like ghosts stepping through a curtain. They were not conclave vessels. They were older, stranger, built from materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid, between real and imagined. Ambassador Vasquez, a voice crackled through her communication system. "Do not be afraid. We are the Vagrant Collective. We have been waiting for you for a very long time." Lena's hand hovered over the emergency weapons console. "Waiting for me? I've never heard of your collective." "No," the voice agreed. "The Conclave made sure of that. They exiled us, scattered us across the dark spaces between galaxies. Our crime was believing a truth they wanted to forget. We believed the speakers never truly died." The vagrant ships formed an escort around Elena's vessel, guiding her toward a structure hidden in the shadow of a dying star. It was a space station of impossible size, home to species Elena had never seen in any database. Beings of crystal and shadow, creatures of pure sound. Entities that existed as mathematical equations given physical form. They were the outcasts, the heretics, the ones who had refused to accept that the universe's creators were gone forever. Being named Kethrel, met Elena at the docking bay. It existed as a sphere of compressed light, warm and golden, speaking through vibrations in the air itself. The conclave taught that the speakers sacrificed themselves completely. Kethrel explained as they walked through corridors lined with ancient carvings. They said the words were all that remained, and that those words would last forever without maintenance. They were wrong. Wrong about what? Everything. Kethrel stopped before a massive door carved with symbols that made Elena's eyes water to look at. The speakers did not sacrifice all of themselves. They left seeds. Not just in humanity, but in every species that would ever exist. Every intelligent race in the universe carries a single piece of the primordial tongue. One sound, one note. One fragment of the voice that made everything. The door opened, revealing a chamber filled with representatives from hundreds of species. They were all looking at Elena, some with hope, some with curiosity, some with a desperate, hungry need that made her uncomfortable. But only humanity, Kethrel continued, carries the grammar, the structure, the rules that give meaning to all the other sounds. Alone, each species can make noise. Together with humanity, we can make words. Real words. The kind that reshape reality. Lena understood now why the conclave feared her species. It was not that humans could speak the primordial tongue alone. It was that humans could teach others to speak it with them. A single human was a curiosity. Humanity united with the other species of the universe was an unstoppable force. "You want to form a choir?" Alina said. "We want to save existence," Kethril replied. "The two goals are the same." The training began immediately. Alina had brought 5 humans with her, each chosen for their unique mastery of sound. There was Dulgurma, a Mongolian throat singer who could produce multiple notes simultaneously using techniques passed down for centuries. There was Kofi Agriot from Ghana, whose family had been keepers of oral history for 40 generations. There was Aroha, a Mabori elder, who knew songs that had been sung since her people first crossed the Pacific. There was Isabella, an opera soprano, whose voice could shatter glass or bring audiences to tears. And there was Marcus Williams, a beatboxer from Brooklyn who could make his voice sound like anything from drums to entire orchestras. They were teachers now, not performers. And their students were aliens who heard sound in ways humans could barely imagine. The work was exhausting. The crystalline minds could produce frequencies too high for human ears, while the Voidwalkers spoke in tones too low to register. The challenge was not learning each other's sounds. The challenge was learning to blend them into something unified. Days turned into weeks. Failures outnumbered successes. Ancient rivalries between species flared up, nearly destroying the alliance before it could begin. The Zethkai exiles refused to work with the crystalline minds, citing wars fought millions of years ago. The mathematical entities could not understand why rhythm mattered more than precision. The breakthrough came from Marcus Williams, the beatboxer. He had been watching the arguments, the frustration, the failed attempts at harmony, and finally he stood up in the middle of the practice chamber and clapped his hands twice. Everyone fell silent. "You're all thinking about this wrong," he said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "You keep trying to sing the same note at the same time. That's not music. That's just noise happening together." He began to beat a rhythm on his chest, a simple pattern that pulsed like a heartbeat. Music isn't about perfection. It's about timing. It's about knowing when to come in and when to step back. Every voice matters, but no voice should drown out the others. He pointed at Delgurma. "Give me your lowest tone," she began to hum, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. He pointed at a crystalline mind. "Your highest frequency, but wait for it. ... now." The crystal being added its voice, a sound like sunlight turned to music. Somehow, impossibly, it fit with Delgurma's hum. One by one, Marcus added voices to the song. Human and alien, ancient and young, sound and silence woven together by his direction. And for the first time, the chamber filled with something that felt like the first words must have felt. Not perfect harmony, but living harmony. Growing harmony. A song that breathed. When they finished, there was silence. Then Kethril spoke, its light flickering with something that might have been tears. "That," it said, "is what we have been trying to achieve for 10,000 years. And this human did it in an afternoon." Alina felt pride swelling in her chest. But the moment was interrupted by alarms, by flashing lights, by urgent voices calling through the station's systems. The Conclave fleet had found them. 100 warships surrounded the vagrant station, weapons charged, shields raised. The High Arbiter of the Zethkai appeared on their screens, its energy form crackling with barely contained aggression. "You will surrender the humans," it commanded. "You will surrender the reconstructed." Words. "You will submit to judgment for the crime of threatening the stability of the universe. You have 1 rotation to comply. There will be no negotiation." The vagrants looked at Alina. The choir looked at Alina. Marcus Williams looked at her and grinned. "Want to see something cool?" he asked. She nodded. He gathered the choir, arranging them with careful precision. Then he spoke a word to each of them, a single syllable of instruction. When they were ready, he counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The choir spoke a single word. Wait, the sound that emerged was unlike anything Alina had ever heard. It was language, but it was also reality itself, speaking through mortal throats. The word rippled outward from the station, passing through shields, through holes. through the vacuum of space as if none of these things existed. Every ship in the conclave fleet froze, not damaged, not destroyed, simply stopped. Caught in a moment of time like insects in amber, the High Arbiter's final transmission before the freeze was a single question. Filled with ancient terror, what have we awakened? Alina looked at the frozen fleet, at the choir that had just bent reality with their voice, at the humans who had remembered what they truly were. We awakened ourselves, she said quietly, and we're just getting started. The frozen fleet hung in space like a painting, weapons still glowing, shields still raised, crews trapped in a single eternal instant. News of what happened spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every civilization knew the story. The young species from Earth had spoken a word, and reality had listened. But more importantly, they had not destroyed. They had not killed. They had simply asked the universe to wait, and it had obeyed. This changed everything. Ships began arriving at the Vagrant Station. Not warships this time, but diplomatic vessels, science ships. Ancient transports carrying species who had watched from the shadows for millions of years. They came because they were afraid of what humanity could do. They stayed because they were amazed by what humanity chose not to do. Each species brought a gift. A sound. A single phoneme from the primordial tongue. Preserved across generations without understanding, passed down in sacred rituals and half-forgotten songs. The choir grew from dozens to hundreds to thousands. The station expanded, new sections growing like flowers as more and more voices joined the great gathering. But problems grew with them. The crystalline still refused to work with the Zethkai refugees. A mathematical entity accidentally insulted a silicon-based species by suggesting their rhythm was irrational. Two ancient races nearly went to war over which note should be sung first in the great harmony. Lena watched the chaos unfold with growing despair. Outside, the universe was dying. Stars were beginning to flicker irregularly in distant sectors. Reports came in of gravity fluctuating, of time flowing strangely, of entire regions of space where the laws of physics were starting to forget themselves. The resonance vaults were failing faster now, and every day brought new symptoms of the end. Inside the station, the only hope for survival was arguing about seating arrangements. "This will never work," Alina said to Kethril. Watching a shouting match between a void walker and a being made of crystallized sound, there are too many differences, too much history, too much pride. Kethril's light dimmed with sadness. Perhaps, but what choice do we have? The alternative is extinction. It was Aroha, the Imbori elder, who broke the deadlock. She walked into the middle of the arguing crowd and began to sing. Not in the primordial tongue. It's not in any alien language, but in the traditional songs of her people. Songs about the sea and the sky. Songs about ancestors and children yet to be born. Songs about being lost and finding home again. The arguing stopped. Not because the aliens understood the words, but because they understood the feeling. Loss, hope, longing, love. These things were universal, written into the fabric of existence itself. When Aroha finished, she looked at the assembled species with calm. "Ancient eyes, my people crossed an ocean without knowing what waited on the other side," she said. "We had only the stars and our songs to guide us. We were afraid. We made mistakes. We fought among ourselves. But we kept singing, because the song was bigger than any one of us. The song belonged to everyone."
Ow.
She pointed at a crystalline mind, then at a Zethkai exile. "Your ancestors made war. Mine did too. But your ancestors also looked up at the same stars we did. They also wondered about their place in the universe. They also sang to push back the darkness. The war is over. Let it go. What matters now is the song we make together." The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of anger or resentment. It was the silence of understanding. Slowly, the choir began to reassemble. This time, they listened to each other. This time, they compromised. This time, they remembered why they were there. Marcus Williams took charge of the coordination, breaking the massive choir into sections, assigning voices to harmonies based on their natural frequencies. Isabella's soprano became the high melody, while beings of pure gravity provided bass notes that could be felt more than heard. Kofi's rhythmic chanting wove through the whole, providing structure and flow. For the first time, the choir sang as one voice. The sound was beautiful beyond description. It was sunrise and sunset, birth and death, the first light of creation and the last warmth of dying stars, all woven into a single, endless moment. Reality rippled around them, the fabric of space responding to the song like a sleeping giant stirring in dreams. They were ready. It was time to face the resonance vaults. The journey to the first vault took 3 days. It sat at the center of the universe, in a region of space so old that the stars around it had burned out and been reborn a dozen times. The vault itself was not a building or a machine. It was a wound in reality, a place where the first words had been spoken so powerfully that the echo had never faded. What waited inside was not what they expected. The choir entered through gates that had not opened in millions of years. They walked through corridors where gravity changed direction every few steps, where light bent in impossible angles, where the walls themselves seemed to be made of frozen sound. At the heart of the vault they found it, entropy itself, given form and consciousness. A being of absolute darkness, not evil, not angry, but patient, eternal, inevitable. "You have come to restore the words," entropy said. Its voice was not sound. It was the absence of sound, the silence between notes, the pause between heartbeats. "I wondered when you would try." Lena stepped forward, her choir behind her. "We have come to save existence." "Existence is already saved," entropy replied. "I am its salvation. I am the rest that comes after effort, the sleep that follows waking, the peace that follows struggle. You cannot fight me. I am not your enemy. I am your destination." Cathrell drifted to Elena's side. The speakers knew this truth when they created the vaults. Entropy cannot be defeated. It can only be delayed. "Then we will delay it," Elena said. Entropy seemed to smile, though it had no face. The speakers said the same thing. They sang their words into reality and sacrificed themselves to maintain them. But sacrifice buys time, not victory. 12 billion years have passed. The debt is coming due. Even if you restore the vaults, you will only postpone the end.
"How long?"
Alina asked. "Another 12 billion years. Perhaps less. Perhaps more. Does it matter? I am patient. I will be waiting when your songs finally end." The choir stood in silence, facing the truth that had broken the ancient speakers. The truth that effort was ultimately pointless, that everything they did would eventually be undone, that existence itself was borrowed time before the eternal silence. Elena thought about Earth, about her grandmother's garden, about the children playing in streets that might not exist tomorrow, about all the stories yet to be told, all the songs yet to be sung, all the love yet to be felt. 12 billion years. That was not nothing. That was everything. "Then we have 12 billion years to figure out something better," she said. "And if we fail, the ones who come after will have their chance. And if they fail, the ones after them. Every moment of existence is a victory against nothing. Every life, every thought, every act of creation is a middle finger to the void." Entropy was silent for a long moment. Then it laughed. The sound was terrifying and strangely beautiful, like the last light of a dying star. "The speakers never talked to me like that," it said. "They were too afraid, too respectful. You humans are interesting. Very well, sing your songs. Restore your vaults. I will continue to wait. But know this, when you are finally ready for silence, when you have sung every song and told every story and felt every feeling, I will be here. Not as an enemy, as a friend, the last friend anyone will ever have." It stepped aside, revealing the heart of the vault, the place where the first words still echoed faintly. The choir took their positions, and they began to sing. The song began with a single loud note from Delgramma's throat, a sound so low it seemed to rise from the depths of the universe itself. Then Isabella's soprano joined, climbing toward heights that no human voice should have been able to reach. Then the aliens added their voices, their sounds, their pieces of the primordial tongue, and the vault filled with music that had not been heard since the dawn of creation. Reality woke up. The walls of the vault began to glow, ancient symbols igniting with light that had been dormant for millions of years. The fading words in the air grew stronger, fed by the choir's song like dying flames given fresh fuel. Alina could feel the fabric of existence shifting around her, the laws of physics tightening, gravity remembering its purpose, time finding its rhythm again. But something was wrong. The ancient speakers appeared around them, ghosts of light and mathematics, the echoes of beings who had sacrificed themselves to create the universe. They watched the choir sing, and their expressions were not hopeful. They were sad. "You sing beautifully," the echo of the first speaker said, its voice barely a whisper against the choir's melody. "But beauty alone cannot hold reality together. The words need more than sound. They need sacrifice. Someone must give themselves to the song, must become part of the fabric of existence forever. Without that gift, your singing will only delay the end by a few thousand years." Alina felt her heart sink. She looked at her choir, at the humans and aliens who had come together against impossible odds. She looked at Entropy, still waiting patiently at the edge of the chamber. She looked at the dying words, still fading despite their best efforts. "I will do it," Kethril said, drifting forward. "I have lived for 800,000 years. I have seen wonders beyond counting. It is time for me to give back to the universe that gave me life," Alina said. "This isn't right. The speakers created the universe, but then they left it alone. They made us custodians of a museum, forever maintaining something we didn't build, forever sacrificing ourselves to preserve the past. That's not living. That's just waiting to die." The first speaker's ghost regarded her with ancient, tired eyes. "Then what would you suggest, young one?" "The words must be maintained. Reality must have structure. Without sacrifice, there is only chaos." Alina turned to Marcus Williams, the beatboxer from Brooklyn. He was still conducting the choir, his hands moving in patterns that somehow translated alien sounds into human rhythms and back again. "Marcus," she said, "what happens when a song ends?" He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what comes after? When a song finishes, what happens next?" Marcus smiled, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Another song. Different song. Maybe better, maybe worse, but different. Music isn't about playing one song forever. It's about what you play next." Alina turned back to the first speaker. "Your words are beautiful. They shaped the universe for 12 billion years. But maybe it's time for a new song." Silence fell across the vault. The choir stopped singing. Even Entropy leaned forward, curious despite itself. "A new song?" the first speaker asked. "You would unmake everything we created. Every star, every planet, every life that exists within our reality." "No," Alina said. "I would let reality grow. Your words are static. They've been the same since the beginning. But everything real changes. Stars are born and die. Species evolve and adapt. Even your vaults are breaking down because nothing can stay the same forever. What if the song wasn't fixed? What if it could grow?" She gestured at the choir around her. "We have thousands of species here. Every one of them carries a piece of your original voice. But they've also developed their own sounds, their own music, over billions of years. What if we wove those new sounds into the old? What if instead of just maintaining the first words, we added new verses?" The first speaker was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it began to laugh. The sound was like light breaking through clouds. "We never considered that," it admitted. "We were so focused on preservation that we forgot about creation. We made a universe and then stopped, thinking our work was done. But creation is not an act. It is a process. It never ends." The ghost turned to Entropy, the patient darkness watching from the shadows. "What say you, old friend? Would you accept a song that grows and changes?" Entropy considered the question. "I accept all endings," it said finally. "But if your song includes room for endings, for change, As for letting go of the old to make way for the new, then I will accept that too. I will become your final note when you are ready for silence. But I will not force silence upon you. That was never my purpose. What was your purpose? Alina asked. Entropy's darkness seemed to soften, just slightly. To give meaning to existence. Nothing matters if it lasts forever. It is the ending that makes the story worth telling. The speakers forgot that. They were so afraid of me that they tried to make their song eternal. But eternal songs become prisons. They become tortures. They become hells. It extended something that might have been a hand toward Alina. Add me to your choir. Let me be the rests between notes. The silence that gives rhythm to sound. The ending that gives meaning to beginning. I will not fight you. I never wanted to fight you. I only wanted to be included. Alina took the offered hand. The darkness was cold, but not hostile. It was the cold of sleep after a long day. The cold of peace after struggle. Welcome to the choir, she said. The singing resumed. But now it was different. Now it was not about maintaining the old words. It was about adding new ones. Every species contributed their unique sounds, their evolved languages, their songs and prayers and dreams. The vaults transformed from museums into gardens, places where reality could grow and change and evolve. And entropy sang too. Its silence woven between the notes, giving shape and meaning to the music. Death was no longer an enemy. It was a collaborator. The universe breathed for the first time in 12 billion years. When it was over, Alina stood at the center of the restored vault, surrounded by friends and allies from 1,000 worlds. The first speaker's ghost smiled at her before fading into the new song, finally at peace. What now? Kethril asked. Alina thought about it. Now we go back to the conclave. We unfreeze their fleet. We show them what we've done, and we invite them to join us. And if they refuse, if they still see us as a threat, Alina smiled. Then we sing to them. Not words of power, not commands, just music. Just the sound of everything that exists, singing together. If they can hear that and still want war, then they were never really alive to begin with. The choir returned to normal space. The frozen conclave fleet was released from its temporal prison. And Alina Vasquez, first human ambassador to the stars,
Yes.
stood before the assembled elder races of the universe with a simple message. We are not your children, she said. We are not your servants. We are not your threat. We are your family. We are the voice you forgot you had. And we would very much like to sing with you if you're willing to learn a new song. There was a long silence. Then the High Arbiter of the Zethkai, the same being who had ordered their destruction, drifted forward. Teach us, it said. And so they did. Years later, Alina returned to the conclave chamber where it all began. The holographic timeline still hung in the air, but it had been updated. Humanity's mark was no longer a tiny at the end. It stretched across the entire display, woven into every era, every civilization, every moment. A young alien child approached her, its eyes wide with wonder. What do humans call themselves? It asked. Alina knelt down to meet its gaze. Behind her, the sound of the eternal choir drifted through the halls. A song that would never be the same twice, a song that welcomed every voice. We are the chorus, she said, and we're still learning the words. The child smiled and ran off to join the singing. Alina watched it go, then turned to look out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, entropy waited, patient and peaceful.